Before 200 years, the dragon screamed. Not roars. Not battle cries. Screams. The kind that clawed into bone. The kind that turned brave men into deserters. The kind that echoed through the mines beneath Blackstone Mountain until even the guards stopped reacting. The screaming was constant. Morning. Midnight. Storm. Snow. It was the sound of rage chained to stone. And then, one night, it stopped. The silence was worse. Marcus Hale was halfway down the spiral stair when he realized it. He froze. No echo. No rumble. No distant metallic strain of chains pulled tight. Just dripping water. And the mountain breathing. The torches along the tunnel flickered as if something enormous had inhaled. Marcus swallowed. The other workers had said you got used to the screaming. That after a while it became background noise, like wind through cracks in the rock. But this? This felt like waiting. 3 rules govern the lower levels. Don't look directly at the dragon. Don't speak to the dragon. Never approach the chains. Rule 3 was carved above the final gate in iron letters. Never approach the chains. The chains weren't just metal. They were curses. Forged 2 centuries ago when 7 kingdoms united to bring down the Ember Queen, the last great sky tyrant. Legend said she burned entire fleets from the air. That cities glowed red for days after she passed overhead. It had taken betrayal to bind her. Not strength. Betrayal. Now she lived beneath the mountain. Screaming. Until tonight. Marcus reached the final corridor. The air was warmer here. Always warmer. Like the mountain had a heartbeat, and this was the chamber where it pulsed. 2 guards stood outside the massive iron doors. They looked uneasy. You hear it, one muttered. That's the problem, the other answered. Marcus adjusted his grip on what he carried. A wooden bowl. Steam curled upward, thin and pale in the torchlight. The guard stared at him. You're not serious. He didn't answer. You think soup is going to what? Calm it, the taller guard scoffed. Marcus finally spoke. Has anyone tried? They laughed at that. Dragons eat livestock. Soldiers. Sometimes each other. Not broth. Marcus looked at the iron doors. Beyond them lay a cavern the size of a cathedral. Runes carved into every wall. Chains thicker than tree trunks anchored into glowing sigils. And in the center. He'd only seen her once before, from the doorway. A mass of crimson scale and scarred wings pinned to the earth by ancient magic. He remembered her eyes most. Not wild. Not mad. Just, tired. The silence pressed harder. He stepped forward. The guards didn't stop him. Maybe they were curious. Maybe they didn't want to be the ones to enter first. The iron doors groaned open. Heat washed over him. The chamber beyond was vast and dim, lit by runes pulsing faint blue along the stone walls. Massive chains stretched from each of her limbs to anchor points etched with symbols that hummed quietly in the air. She was awake. Her head rested low between her foreclaws, but her eyes were open. Gold. Ancient. Watching. Marcus felt his pulse in his throat. The rules echoed in his head. Don't look. Don't speak. Don't approach. He stepped inside anyway. The doors slammed shut behind him with a heavy finality that made his stomach tighten. Her gaze followed him. The scraping sound of metal shifting along stone echoed softly as she adjusted one massive claw. The chains did not rattle violently tonight. They whispered. You walk closer than the others. Her voice rolled through the chamber. It wasn't a roar. It was controlled. Deep. And far too calm. Marcus nearly dropped the bowl. He forced his feet forward until he reached the glowing rune circle etched into the floor, the boundary no one crossed. Heat shimmered in the air between them. You stopped screaming, he said before he could stop himself. A pause. The faintest curl of smoke slipped from her nostrils. Did you miss it? The question unsettled him more than anger would have. No, he admitted. It just felt wrong. The quiet. Her chains tightened slightly as she lifted her head. Massive. Scarred. One horn chipped near the base. You are afraid, she observed. Yes. And yet you approach. He nodded. The steam from the bowl drifted toward her. The scent of chicken broth, herbs, and root vegetables carried through the warm air. Her nostrils flared. What do you carry? She asked. Marcus swallowed. Soup. Silence. Then. A low sound, almost like disbelief. Soup. It's hot, he added, immediately regretting how small that sounded. The dragon studied him in a way that made him feel transparent. You know what I am, she said. Yes. You know why I am here. Because they were afraid of you. A chain shifted. Stone groaned faintly. And you are not. I am, he said honestly. But I don't think screaming for 200 years fixes anything. For a long moment, she said nothing. The runes along the walls pulsed faintly in rhythm. I have been fed scraps, she finally said. Thrown meat. Bones. Refuse. Her voice held no fury. Just emptiness. Marcus stepped forward, 1 foot inside the rune circle. The air crackled against his skin. The chains hummed. He knelt slowly and set the bowl at the very edge of the boundary. Steam rose between them. I made this for you, he said. Her massive head lowered slightly. Golden eyes locked onto his. The entire mountain seemed to hold its breath. Why, she asked quietly, would you feed me? Marcus met her gaze. Because no one else has. The chamber fell into absolute silence. And somewhere deep within the stone, something shifted. The silence stretched so long Marcus wondered if he had miscalculated everything. The runes along the chamber walls pulsed faintly, casting slow blue light across ancient red scales. Heat shimmered in the air between them, bending the rising steam from the bowl. The dragon did not move. You expect something, she said at last. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It vibrated through the stone and into his ribs. Marcus stayed kneeling. No. All humans expect something. Maybe, he admitted. But not this time. Her eyes narrowed slightly. For 200 years, she continued, they have come down here with fear in their lungs and steel in their hands. Even when they feed me, it is done with disgust. A chain shifted behind her shoulder. Not violently. Just enough to remind him how restrained power felt when it breathed. You do not carry steel, she observed. I left it upstairs. You did not leave your fear. No. A faint curl of smoke drifted from her nostrils again. Not threatening. Just thoughtful. The steam from the soup continued rising. Her gaze dropped to it. What is in it? She asked. Chicken. Carrots. Salt. A little thyme. Thyme, she repeated, unfamiliar with the word. It's an herb. Makes things taste warmer. Her head tilted, just slightly. Warmer, she echoed. Marcus nodded toward the bowl. You don't have to trust me. You can burn it if you want. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. If I breathe flame inside this circle, she said slowly, the runes will punish me. Marcus looked down at the glowing symbols etched around him. They hurt. They remind. That word carried weight. He hesitated, then did something reckless. He slid the bowl a few inches closer to her. The runes beneath it glowed brighter for a moment, reacting to the movement across the boundary line. The dragon stiffened. You crossed the line carelessly, she warned. I know. You do not know what holds me here. Hatred, he said quietly. Her gaze snapped back to him. Careful, human. The guards talk, he continued, forcing himself not to look away. They say the chains were forged with ancient magic. That they bind your strength. They bind my fury, she corrected. Another silence. Marcus frowned slightly. What's the difference? Her eyes darkened. If they bound my strength, she said, I would have broken them long ago. The chains hummed faintly in agreement. Marcus looked at the thick metal links stretching from her forelimbs to the glowing anchors in the walls. So they hold you because you're angry? Yes. And you're angry because they chained you? Yes. He exhaled slowly. That's a terrible design. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not quite amusement. But close. You speak boldly for something so fragile. He glanced at his own shaking hands. I'm aware. The steam brushed against her scales. She lowered her head a little further. The massive shape of her snout hovered inches above the bowl now. Heat radiated from her breath, but she did not ignite it. You believe food will change what 2 centuries have carved into me? She asked. No, Marcus said honestly. I just think everyone deserves something made on purpose. Her eyes flicked back to his. On purpose. It wasn't scraps. I didn't throw it. I made it. The chamber grew still again. Slowly, very slowly, she extended her tongue and touched the surface of the broth. The liquid rippled. The runes along the wall flickered once. Marcus held his breath. She tasted. Not a gulp. Not greed. A cautious test. Her pupils narrowed. The chains along her foreleg vibrated faintly. Something in the air shifted. It is warm, she said quietly. That's the point. She took another, slightly deeper taste. The metal around her wrist gave a faint ticking sound. Marcus looked up sharply. The rune nearest her limb glowed brighter, then dimmed again. She stilled instantly. The chains tightened for a brief second, then relaxed. You should leave, she said suddenly. Marcus blinked. Why? The chains react to imbalance. You just tasted soup. Yes. And? And I did not feel rage when I did. The words hung in the chamber like fragile glass. Marcus stared at her. You felt, what? Another small taste. Another flicker. Curiosity, she admitted. A sharp cracking sound echoed faintly from somewhere along the wall. Both of them froze. The runes pulsed unevenly now, their glow stuttering instead of flowing. Marcus rose slightly from his kneel. Did that just? Yes, she whispered. A thin line of red light crawled along one of the chains wrapped around her foreleg. The metal did not break. But it softened. Just a fraction. Her breathing deepened. For 2 centuries, she said slowly, I have fed the magic that binds me. Hatred. Bitterness. Memory. She looked down at the bowl. You brought me something that does not taste like any of those. Another faint crack. Stone dust drifted from the ceiling. Marcus felt his pulse spike. You're saying the chains. They weaken when I do not burn. Her golden eyes met his again. Not predator. Not prisoner. Something new. Why would you do this? She asked, almost to herself. Marcus didn't have a grand answer. He just shrugged slightly. Because screaming for 200 years sounded lonely. Silence fell again. But this time? It wasn't heavy. And somewhere deep in the mountain. A second crack answered the first. The second crack was louder. Not thunder. Not explosion. But sharp enough to slice through the chamber like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. Marcus spun toward the wall. A hairline fracture zigzagged across one of the glowing runestones anchoring the dragon's left chain. The blue light inside it flickered unevenly. The dragon did not move. That was what terrified him most. Her massive body remained perfectly still, head lowered near the bowl, golden eyes fixed on the failing rune. I told you to leave, she said quietly. Marcus swallowed. Is it going to explode? No. Another faint metallic groan rippled through the chamber. It will resist. The chain around her foreleg began to glow faintly red from within, as though heat had seeped into the metal itself. The sound wasn't violent. It was strained. Like something trying to remember how to hold. Marcus stepped backward instinctively. You said they bind your fury, he said. What happens if you're not furious? The dragon's eyes shifted to him slowly. Then they do not know what to feed on. The rune cracked again. A thin shard of stone broke off and shattered against the cavern floor. Above them, dust drifted from the ceiling. The runes along the walls began pulsing out of rhythm, their steady hum faltering into uneven waves of light. Marcus felt the air pressure change. The chamber felt confused. The dragon lifted her head slightly higher. The movement caused every chain attached to her to tighten reflexively. Metal screeched. The anchors in the walls flared bright blue. Her jaw clenched. Not in anger. In restraint. You must not run, she said firmly. Marcus blinked. I wasn't. You were. He forced his boots still. You said they bind your fury, he repeated, voice steadier now. So don't give it to them. The chains vibrated. A third crack answered him. The dragon closed her eyes briefly. For 200 years, she had held onto fire. Onto betrayal. Onto the memory of falling from the sky in chains forged by those she once trusted. Hatred had kept her strong. Hatred had kept her bound. Now something else was sitting in front of her. Warm. Unthreatening. Unarmed. She inhaled slowly. The scent of broth lingered in the air. Not blood. Not ash. Just warmth. The chain around her foreleg glowed brighter. Then. A single link sagged. Marcus stared. The metal didn't shatter. It softened. As if it had forgotten how to be solid. The rune anchoring it flared violently. Blue light shot across the cavern walls in jagged patterns. The dragon's eyes snapped open. You see now, she murmured. See what? They were never forged to hold peace. Another link bent inward with a dull metallic groan. The sound was unmistakable. Failure. The magic in the air turned sharp and electric. Marcus felt his skin prickle. From above, faint shouts echoed down the upper corridors. The guards had felt it. The mountain was trembling. You could break them right now, Marcus whispered. Her gaze shifted to him. Power radiated from her in waves, restrained only by will. Yes. Then why aren't you? Silence. The chains tightened once more as if testing her resolve. Because fury was easy. Burning was instinct. But this? This required choice. I will not trade one prison for another, she said quietly. The words landed heavy. Another crack split through the rune stone. This one spider webbed across its surface. The glowing blue dimmed to a sickly pulse. The softened chain link gave way entirely. It didn't snap. It melted. Molten metal dripped onto the cavern floor, hissing softly as it pooled like liquid shadow. Marcus stared at it in disbelief. You didn't even pull, he said. No. The dragon flexed her foreleg slightly. The remaining chains around that limb groaned under shifting tension. The anchors flared brighter, desperately trying to compensate. The chamber shook harder now. Footsteps thundered somewhere above. Alarms began to echo faintly from distant halls. Marcus looked toward the massive iron doors. They're coming. Yes. Are you going to burn them? She finished. Her eyes returned to the bowl of soup still sitting near the boundary. Steam continued rising. Untouched by chaos. She inhaled once more. The last of the tension drained from her shoulders. No, she said. And with that single word, the final intact link on her left foreleg liquefied. It poured onto the stone like wax. The rune anchoring it shattered entirely. A pulse of energy burst outward through the chamber, knocking Marcus off his feet. The remaining chains attached to her other limbs rattled violently, reacting to the sudden imbalance. Blue light flickered erratically. The dragon rose slightly onto three bound limbs. Free on one side. The mountain roared in protest. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Marcus scrambled back to his knees, heart hammering. You're free, he breathed. She looked down at her unchained limb. Flexed her claws slowly. The stone beneath them cracked. No, she corrected softly. I am becoming free. Above them, the iron doors shuddered as guards pounded from the other side. The remaining chains began glowing red, straining against a magic that was unraveling. The dragon lowered her head toward Marcus once more. You should leave, she said again. But this time? There was no warning in her voice. Only concern. And somewhere in the failing magic of the chamber, the rest of the chains began to melt. The first iron door hinge exploded inward. Not from flame. From pressure. The magic anchoring the chamber was collapsing faster than the guards could reinforce it. Marcus scrambled to his feet as dust and stone fragments rained down around him. The remaining chains lashed violently across the cavern floor, glowing red from within like veins filled with molten light. The dragon stood higher now. 3 limbs still bound. 1 completely free. And the mountain was losing its grip. Above the doors, alarm bells rang wildly. Containment breach, someone shouted from the corridor beyond. Reinforce the sigils. Marcus turned back toward her. You don't have much time. Her golden eyes were not wild. Not bloodshot. Not furious. They were steady. Calculating. The chains along her right wing tightened brutally, trying to force her back down. The rune anchor flared bright blue, then sputtered. Cracks splintered outward across the wall. She inhaled slowly. Heat rippled through the chamber. Marcus felt it press against his skin. For 200 years, that heat had meant destruction. Now it hovered, restrained. The guards outside began forcing the doors open with heavy iron bars. Steel screeched against stone. If they come in, Marcus said carefully, they won't stop to talk. I know. Another chain snapped, not shattered, but liquefied like the first. Molten metal spilled across the stone floor in glowing streams. Her second foreleg came free. The chamber trembled harder. Chunks of rock dropped from the ceiling. The rune circles beneath Marcus' boots dimmed, their glow fading into weak flickers. He looked up at her fully now. Unbound on one side. Half risen. Wings twitching against their restraints. You could tear this mountain open, he said. Yes. You could burn the city. Yes. You could make them regret 200 years. The doors finally burst inward. Guards flooded into the chamber with spears and rune-forged shields, their eyes wide with panic. They froze when they saw her. Half free. Standing. Alive in a way she had not been before. Fall back, one captain shouted. Activate suppression. A cluster of mags behind them raised staffs glowing with blue sigils. The dragon's gaze shifted toward the doorway. Marcus saw it. That flicker. That ancient instinct. Fire rose in her throat, glowing faintly between her teeth. The remaining chains rattled violently, reacting to the surge of fury building in her chest. The runes flared bright again. Trying to hold. Trying to feed. Marcus stepped forward. Not backward. Forward. He positioned himself between the guards and the dragon. The captain stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Move, Hale. Get clear. Marcus didn't move. He looked up at her. They're afraid, he said quietly. Yes. And you could prove them right. The heat in her throat intensified. The remaining chains glowed brighter. Metal groaned under stress. You owe them nothing, Marcus continued. Her eyes burned like molten gold. I owe them nothing, she agreed. Another chain liquefied. Her wing tore free. Stone anchors shattered. Wind from the sudden motion blasted through the chamber, knocking guards backward. Spears clattered to the ground. Dust filled the air. Now only one chain remained. Wrapped around her opposite hind leg. The final anchor flared with desperate light. The mags began chanting. Blue energy arced toward her in jagged bolts. It struck her scales and dispersed harmlessly. The captain staggered backward. She's too strong. Marcus didn't look away from her. You can end this with fire, he said softly. Yes. You've done it before. Silence stretched in the chaos. The final chain vibrated violently. The dragon's gaze dropped from the guards. Back to Marcus. Steam still curled faintly from the forgotten bowl of soup near the boundary circle. Warm. Simple. Unarmed. For 2 centuries, every human who entered this chamber had carried fear and weapons. This one had carried food. The fire in her throat dimmed. The chain tightened once more. Then sagged. Not from force. From surrender. The final link melted quietly onto the stone. The anchor rune shattered into dust. The dragon stood fully free. No chains. No glowing restraints. Only power. The guards scrambled backward toward the corridor, dropping weapons in their panic. The captain fell to one knee, expecting death. Marcus felt the heat surge once more. Not wild. Not uncontrolled. Just immense. She could burn them all. She could collapse the mountain. She could take the sky back in one violent, blazing ascent. Instead, she lowered her head. Slowly. Gently. Until her massive gaze was level with Marcus. You remained, she said. Yes. You stood between me and those who chained me. Yes. The chamber was silent now except for falling dust and distant alarms. You gave me something I had forgotten. Marcus swallowed. What? A choice. Her wings unfurled fully for the first time in 200 years. The force of it extinguished half the torches in the chamber. She turned her head toward the tunnel leading upward. Toward the surface. Toward open sky. The guards braced themselves. But she did not exhale flame. She did not roar. She stepped forward carefully, massive claws cracking stone, but avoiding the fallen soldiers entirely. When she reached the doorway, she paused. Looked back once more. If I burn, she said quietly, I remain what they feared. Marcus nodded slowly. And if you don't? Her eyes softened. Then I become something else. With one powerful beat of her wings, she surged upward through the collapsing ceiling of the chamber. Stone shattered. Moonlight poured down through the opening she carved. Wind howled through the mountain tunnels. The guards lay stunned. Marcus shielded his face from debris. Above the mountain, a massive shadow rose into the night sky. Free. And for the first time in 2 centuries, the dragon did not roar. The mountain did not burn. That was the first thing people noticed. When the dust settled and the alarms finally died, the city below Blackstone waited for fire. For ash. For revenge 2 centuries overdue. Instead, dawn arrived quietly. Marcus stood at the ridge above the shattered chamber entrance, coat torn, hands still shaking from what he had witnessed. The sky was pale silver. Clouds stretched thin across the horizon. And far above, a vast shape circled. Not descending. Not attacking. Just circling. Free. Behind him, soldiers and mags scrambled across the broken stone, assessing damage, shouting reports, preparing for a counterstrike that never came. She's gone, one of the captains breathed. No, Marcus said softly. He didn't take his eyes off the sky. She's choosing. The dragon banked slowly against the sunrise. Her wings cut through the clouds like living sails. Sunlight caught along her crimson scales, igniting them in gold rather than flame. For 200 years she had known only stone ceilings. Now there was nothing above her. Nothing restraining her breath. She could feel cities below. Hear distant bells. Smell livestock, fear, movement. Power hummed through every muscle. She could descend. She could make the world remember her name in terror. It would be easy. So easy. Her wings slowed. She hovered in the high air. And for the first time since chains first wrapped around her limbs, she did not feel rage clawing at her chest. She felt something unfamiliar. Lightness. Far below, Marcus stepped farther onto the ridge, ignoring the shouted warnings behind him. "Get back from the edge," someone called. He didn't move. The wind shifted. A shadow passed over him. Massive. Silent. She descended, not in a dive of war, but in a controlled glide. She landed on the opposite cliff face, stone cracking beneath her weight but not shattering. Soldiers below panicked, raising weapons again. Marcus lifted one hand. "Stand down," he called. They hesitated. Because she had not attacked. The dragon folded her wings slowly. The valley fell still. Her golden eyes fixed on Marcus across the narrow chasm. "You remain," she observed. "Yes. You are either brave or foolish. Probably both." A low rumble rolled through her chest. Not anger. Not threat. Something close to a laugh. "You could have fled when the chains broke," she said. "I thought about it. But you stayed." "Yes." Wind tugged at his coat. He looked smaller than ever standing on the broken stone ridge. "You could burn us all," he added quietly. "I could." The soldiers tightened their grips. The mags whispered incantations under their breath. The dragon's gaze swept over the valley once. Then returned to Marcus. "For 200 years, she said, I believed power was the same as fury." She stepped forward once, claws gripping the cliff's edge. "I was wrong." Silence answered her. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "What will you do now?" he asked. She lifted her head toward the horizon. "The sky is wide." "Yes. There are lands I have never seen without smoke." She spread her wings slightly, testing the air currents. "I would see what the world looks like when I am not trying to conquer it." Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. "That sounds peaceful." "It sounds unfamiliar." The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons as the truth settled in. She was not here to destroy. She was here to decide. Her gaze softened slightly. "You brought warmth into a place forged from hatred," she said. "You did not demand loyalty. You did not demand repayment. You gave, without condition." Marcus shrugged awkwardly. "It was just soup." "No," she corrected gently. "It was a reminder. A reminder that she was more than a weapon. More than a prisoner. More than a story carved in fear." She crouched, muscles coiling beneath her scales. The wind intensified. "You will tell them," she said. "Tell them what?" "That I left by choice." Marcus nodded slowly. "I will." She studied him one last time. "If they chain another like me," she warned softly, "I may return." "That's fair," he replied. A final pause hung between them. Not heavy. Not tragic. Just complete. Then, with one immense beat of her wings, she launched into the sky. Stone fractured under the force. Wind tore across the valley. But no flame followed. She climbed higher. And higher. Until she was only a crimson silhouette against the morning sun. Then, a distant speck. Then, gone. The valley remained intact. The city stood untouched. The mountains smoldered only with broken ruins and melted chains. Marcus exhaled slowly. Behind him, one of the captains approached cautiously. "You could have died," the captain said. "Yes." "You trusted her." Marcus looked toward the empty horizon. "No," he corrected quietly. "I gave her a reason not to burn." And somewhere far beyond the mountain range, a dragon flew beneath open sky. Unchained. Not because she could destroy, but because she chose not to.